Cody Rhodes confirms that AEW and New Japan might be exploring a partnership. Laurie takes us through last night's episode of NXT, and Luke recaps last night's episode of AEW Dynamite.
Support WrestleTalk!
Give us a subscribe.
Hello and welcome to the WrestleTalk Stacked News and Stacked Reviews. I am Chopper P. Quinnell. In a very successful 2 nights of Wrestle Kingdom 14 this past weekend, where we saw Tetsuya Naito become IWGP Heavyweight and Intercontinental Champion at the same time, hashtag Naito 2 belts, Will Ospreay and Hiromu Takahashi literally take wrestling to another level, and Kota Ibushi get disappointed, a lot, in 2 fairly high-profile matches. AEW's Jon Moxley captured the US title off of Lance Archer, while AEW's Chris Jericho defeated Hiroshi Tanahashi, with the stipulation being that if Tanahashi wins, he would be gifted an AEW title shot. While both AEW wrestlers were successful in their matches, some fans, mainly me, were hoping that Tanahashi would get the win over Jericho, mainly because we wanted to see where the stipulation would go, what an AEW title match with Hiroshi Tanahashi in it would look like, and if the fabled AEW and New Japan relationship would come to fruition, something that Tanahashi himself referred to as the Forbidden Door. AEW Forbidden Door confirmed. Well, if you ask Executive Vice President of AEW Cody Rhodes, the relationship between AEW and New Japan already exists. In an interview with the New York Post, Cody would say, "I don't know what a partnership would look like other than what you saw. Chris Jericho was part of one of the main events of Wrestle Kingdom. Jon Moxley as well. They both were successful." What did he call it? The Forbidden Door? It may be forbidden, but clearly the door is opening and closing and opening and closing. It's public knowledge that some guys here, myself included, have exemptions to work New Japan Pro Wrestling, but I know that New Japan Pro Wrestling's focus is New Japan, and AEW's focus is AEW. So more likely what a partnership would look like is perhaps some sharing of talent, some shared creative, but I like how it's referred to as the Forbidden Door. I don't really think it's forbidden at all. Like I said, many people have the exemption to work there. I think it's something in the next year that we will hopefully all explore. We'll explore on our end, they'll explore on their end, and we'll see if it works. So, the relationship already exists, but you're going to explore it during the year, and you need to see if it works? Does it exist or doesn't it? I need to know, Cody! At the very least, it seems like the feelers are being sent out to determine the likelihood of the relationship forming, and this year might be the year where the relationship is fully formed, with the talent exchanges and all that goodness. Once again, despite confirming and also not confirming the existence of the relationship, the fact remains that AEW has been mentioned on New Japan programming, and Chris Jericho came out at Wrestle Kingdom holding the AEW title. Cody has a point that if that's not a relationship, then what is? Perhaps in the future we'll be able to see talent jump the other way, and we see talent such as Kota Ibushi, Will Ospreay, Takahashi, Tanahashi, Okada, Naito, and Jay White make their way to AEW for a few appearances every now and then. That would be nice. Hell, Jericho name-dropped him and Moxley wrestling at Wrestle Kingdom 14 on AEW Dynamite this week. The seeds are already there, just let the tree grow and the branches of collaboration will sprout. Just work together already, will ya? But then again, with New Japan's complications surrounding their existing partnerships, specifically with Ring of Honor, and with New Japan's owners Bushiroad recently acquiring Stardom, perhaps the focus for them will be more on building Stardom with some potential New Japan crossover, more so than the American crossover with AEW. Only time will tell, but man, it's an interesting dynamic to look at. But enough of that, over to Laurie for the NXT recap. Hot tag!
Before we fire into the NXT review though, we quickly have to thank the Rocket Dan Van Sky for their support on Patreon. Tony Storm joins NXT, the ready salted flavoured version. The Dusty Classic kicks off big styly, and Keith Lee becomes the #1 contender to the North American Championship. Because this week's NXT had a stacked I don't get the effects. Card, it had a stacked card, and I will say this, not everything actually delivered, but there was a lot to love about the show. Newly minted NXT Women's Champion Rhea Ripley kicked things off with a promo talking about memories. It is weirdly already too soon to be reminded of cats. Oh, disgusting. and sexy. Before Rhea really managed to get cooking, stirring up the already hot crowd, the young Miss Toni Storm appeared to pour cold water on events. But actually, this just sort of worked like a sauna and actually made the crowd even hotter. And they got hotter still as Kaylee Ray, Io Shirai, Bianca Belair, Candice LeRae all arrived to stake a claim on the championship. This was a really exciting section that showed us just how stacked the women's division is and just how under siege the new young champion is, and it never outstayed its welcome, and it managed to be funny to boot. This was an awesome opening. It also led us right into a 6-woman tag with the Aussie Pixie Coalition taking on the heels, who had serious issues staying on the same page as Belair and Io Shirai kept sort of bonking each other off the apron. That gave Rhea the space to hit the Riptide and pick up the win. The Blonde Squad then all celebrate in the ring together, but not before everyone has a good old look at the title. Next was the first of 2 awesome Tommaso Ciampa promo packages about losing Goldie. Ciampa says that the belt was his life, Adam Cole took it, and he wants it back. This was all fantastic stuff, as was the one later on. The Dusty Classic kicked off after that with the Forgotten Sons taking on Imperium. It was an impressive display of athleticism all around, but specifically by Fabian Eichner, who despite having a broken nose, was flinging dudes and himself around with sort of gay abandon. The Imperium boys managed to pick up a win with the European Bomb, meaning they head into Sunday's TakeOver Blackpool 2 with some serious momentum. Something that can't be said for the current champions. Matt Riddle then hilariously explained why he and Pete Dunne are teaming in the Dusty Classic. The answer? He's high. Austin Theory had a character-building win against Joaquin Wilde next, as it appears that his showing against Roderick Strong over the Christmas period has him earmarked for big things in NXT. After that, the Undisputed Era's Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly took on NXT UK Tag Champs Gallus in a match didn't actually do a whole lot for me. It was quite slow and stuck kind of too closely to the Undisputed Era formula that we've seen of late. The guys kind of getting beaten down for most of the match, and then they use the numbers to get the advantage to cheat the win. The same thing happened here. Johnny Gargano then came in to cut a promo on Finn Balor, saying that the Prince built NXT, yeah, sure. But he also left as soon as he got the call, leaving Johnny to strap a rocket to NXT and fly it into space. And Finn is just annoyed that he got left behind, which kind of might explain the little hand tattoo that Finn's got now. It's a sad little thing. He's a lonely little spaceman. Finn arrives and says that if Johnny wants a fight, he should talk to Regal, and the pair can do it at TakeOver Portland if he makes it that far. Yes, flippin' please. It was then announced that Kushida will be teaming with his former NJPW tag partner Alex Shelley for the Dusty Classic. The Time Splitters are getting back together, and WWE thought they'd just announce that all casual-like. Crazy, because it could have just been a surprise entrance for next week's show. Mia Yim then took on Kaden Carter, who did a load of little luchador things, but ultimately didn't protect her neck, leaping right into one from Yim from the turnbuckle. But before anyone can celebrate and show off sportsmanship properly, Chelsea Green attacks from behind, making her long-awaited NXT TV debut. She is then revealed to be the first signee of the Robert Stone brand, run by former TNA star Robbie E. This segment fell as flat as the recipient of a Banzai drop. Green's attack was a little bit too short, the announcement was underwhelming, and it seems like a waste of Stone in this managerial role. Plus the fact that the last time we saw Chelsea Green, she's been losing on main event. Where has she been in NXT for the whole time she's been there? Thankfully, everything picked up as the main event saw Keith Lee win out over Damian Priest, Dominik Dijakovic, and Cameron Grimes to become the #1 contender to Roderick Strong's North American title. This match was fast-paced, full of insane sequences, and gave everyone their time to shine. Even Cameron Grimes' hat got a cheer as he fired up and pointed at it. That hat. Now this feels like NXT making good on that final stretch of 2019 that Keith Lee had, and the impact he made across WWE as a whole since Survivor Series. Here's hoping that they actually put the belt on him. It was just such a ram show. So much happened on NXT. I haven't even mentioned that they announced a Women's Battle Royal to decide the #1 contender for next week. I mean, I have now, but as I said in the intro, the show was stacked. And not everything worked as well as you would have hoped, and some of the announcements were underplayed massively. Hello, Alex Shelley. But Keith Lee's win, the opening segment, and the promo work throughout were all stellar. So I am giving this NXT a high 3 out of 5. Now, over to Luke for the AEW review.
Thanks, Laurie, but enough of your developmental nonsense. It's time to get elite as I review the 8th of January 2020 edition of AEW Dynamite in about 4 minutes. Ring that bell. The show opened with Private Party taking on Kenny Omega and Hangman Page, who has refused to pay $12 for a drink, which is understandable. That is a ludicrous amount of money for a drink. This was the match that saw Omega and Page get back on the same page. After a few weeks of issues. Page even stopped himself from nearly hitting the buckshot on Kenny. Private Party held their own and nearly got the win with gin and juice, but Omega and Page hit a buckshot V-trigger combo for the win. Hangman didn't look best pleased as they did bump heads during the match. It was a really well told story as they celebrated. Pac was then shown on the big screen attacking Michael Nakazawa, asking for his one-on-one rematch, finally paying off on that angle from a few weeks ago. Look, I know that they did do something on Dark, but that wasn't shown on Dynamite, so it almost feels like it's out of continuity. Brandy Rhodes was out for commentary during Chris Statlander's AEW Women's Championship match against Riho, which was decent action ruined by Nightmare Collective nonsense. Awesome Kong and Mel came out for the distraction, which led to the debut of Japanese deathmatch legend Luther to no crowd response, because why? Man, AEW are not nailing these debuts as of late. The crowd totally died despite Riho and Statlander's best efforts to get them back into it with a series of really good near falls. But Kong tripped Chris Statlander to allow Riho to get the win. The Nightmare Collective attacked after the match, and Hikaru Shida and Big Swole ran out to make the save, with Britt Baker deciding to stay in her seat. That was honestly my favorite moment of this overbooked schmoz, and they announced a tag match between Statlander and Shida versus the Nightmare Collective for Bash at the Beach next week. This was pretty trash, to be honest. We got a video package for Kip Sabian, and then Christopher Daniels took on Sammy Guevara in a decent match, which saw CD get distracted by Pentagon Jr., allowing Sammy to get the win. The Dark Order tried to recruit Daniels, who turned them down, and SCU and the Young Bucks brawled with Grayson and the Creepers. I know people aren't into the Dark Order, but this actually did get heat from the crowd for a change. I was kind of into it myself. The Rhodes Brothers had a really good match with Lucha Brothers, but it's just a shame that most of it took place during an ad break. In hindsight, I'd wish they'd built to this match for a big pay-per-view payoff. Dustin Rhodes picked up the win with the Reckoning, and I hope the Rhodes pinning the number 3 tag team in AEW affects the power rankings. Same for Page and Omega, who've had some pretty big wins together as a team. Otherwise, these wins mean nothing. Tony Schiavone tried to get an answer from Cody about MJF, but Arn Anderson said he would let him know next week. MJF came out for a promo not happy about Cody's lack of answer. Instead, he got DDP, who cut a fabulous promo putting over AEW, doing a better job than Jim Ross, who at one point called them AWE. DDP teased another match and delivered a pair of diamond cutters to The Butcher, The Blade, who came down to support MJF. Dallas was cut off by an MJF low blow, which brought down Dustin and QT Marshall for the save, and they announced a 6-man tag for Bash at the Beach. This was pretty good stuff, actually. Speaking of 6-man tags, and Jurassic Express took on Best Friends and Orange Cassidy in a fun comedy match. The crowd was super into all 6 men, particularly Marco Stunt and Cassidy, popping huge for both of their spots. And Jungle Boy got the pin with a Dragon Rana, his first win in AEW. I really liked this. And the main event saw Chris Jericho get his answer on if Moxley would join the Inner Circle. To the surprise of every fan in the building, Mox said yes and revealed his Inner Circle t-shirt. They all celebrated with a little bit of the bubbly to "You Sold Out" chants from the crowd before Mox revealed he was kidding and gave Le Champion and Sammy a couple of paradigm shifts. This was all very predictable stuff, but you know what? That's not always the worst thing. It was a solid end to a solid show. So that was this week's AEW Dynamite. In about 4 minutes, vote in the poll above my head using the options on screen to let me know what you thought of this episode. I used the word solid a moment ago, and that's the best way to describe this week's episode. Solid. Outside of the Nightmare Collective, and you could make the argument for Dark Order if they're not your cup of tea, this was all solid advancing of various stories, with several plates spinning at once. I thought this week's AEW Dynamite was a high middle of the roads. Is CM Punk making an in-ring return at the Royal Rumble? And what security botch happened on this week's Raw? Click the videos on screen right now to check all of those out. Thank you for watching, and a special thank you to our Patreon pledge hammers, some of which you can see scrolling their way to my stomach. I've been Luke Owen, and that was wrestling.